In this podcast, Billy Lunn shares his personal views and experiences. We value his perspective, but just to note, these are his own views and not necessarily those of IE Hub as a company. As an organisation, we don't take a political position, though we believe it's important to share and listen to different voices. So, hi everyone, welcome back to Pocket Perspectives podcast. My name's Tinisha, and today's guest is someone whose music defined the soundtrack to so many teenage years, including our very own Gemma, who is here today. Billy Lunn is the guitarist and lead vocalist of The Subways, a band that exploded into the scene in the early 2000s and quickly gained a reputation for their electrifying energy, raw honesty, and anthems that still hit hard today. But behind the festival stages and fan base is someone with real insight into what it means to survive as a working musician in the UK, especially in an industry that often must struggle with the spotlight. So welcome to the podcast, Billy.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
No problem.
Thank you so much for coming on. I don't usually join these podcasts. I take a back seat when it comes to this, but I could not miss the opportunity to fangirl. As T said, you shaped the soundtrack of my youth. I feel like I know you and Charlotte on a personal level because you've been such a big part of my life for the last 20 years. So genuinely, thank you for coming on, but also thank you for the music and the words of ABBA.
Bless you, thank you. And I love a good insertion of an ABBA quote there. Excellent, nicely done.
I love it. So for those who are listening, Billy, who do not know you or The Subways, would you be able to give us a little bit of introduction about who you are and how the band got started, please?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Billy, singer, guitarist and songwriter of the rock band The Subways. We got started in my parents' council house in Welwyn Garden City, writing our own songs and recording them in their tiny kitchen. We record the demos, then burn those demos onto CDs, then send them out to as many promoters as we could find. For a few years, we were gigging in dive bars in London before being picked up by Warner Records in 2004. And then in 2005, we released our debut album, Young for Eternity. Since then, we've released 4 more albums, and we've been lucky enough to consistently tour the world with our music for the last 20 years. This year, a nice little promo, little plug, we released our best of album called When I'm With You, and that's due out in October. And right now we're working on writing and recording our 6th album.
Amazing, very exciting. And say, outside the music, this might be a bit of a difficult question, but how would you describe yourself as a person or just how you see yourself today?
If I were pushed, I would describe myself as a creative, generally. I know that's quite nebulous, but I just like to make things. I like to make songs, but I also like to make other sorts of things. I'm currently writing a fiction novel. Having taken a degree in English at Cambridge as a mature student. I write a lot of poetry. I have my own recording studio where I like to record up and coming bands. Music engineering and music theory continue to fascinate me, so I indulge that to the utmost by buying lots of recording equipment and using that as much as possible. I also like to make people happy. That's got me in trouble quite a few times in the past. People pleasing isn't necessarily a healthy attribute to have, but I've worked really hard on understanding what's healthy and what's unhealthy in that respect. And it's made things a lot easier in my life. Because of what I experienced as a child, the idea of saying no to people used to really scare me. So I'd bend myself into all sorts of shapes, and it ended up creating this tangled web, and I couldn't quite escape from it until someone came along and just sort of hacked it all down. And though that was raw, that was ultimately, I think, for the best. I've never been more content to be who I am in this life, and I feel like I can finally like myself, and I think I like who I am. So yeah.
I love that. I'm also a self-confessed people pleaser, and it took me a while to realise you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, don't you? Before you help anyone else,
it's so tough. Like saying no has always been really, really difficult for me. So, but I put it into practice now, and I try not to feel too bad about it. So yeah.
Definitely, I love that. And what made you say yes to coming on this podcast? Because obviously the aim of this podcast is to talk about money and finances for people, and kind of break the taboo of quite in England. We can be a bit like, oh, I don't want to talk about money. So what made you want to come on today?
Mainly, I just love to talk. A lot of people in my life know that fact almost too painfully. I love conversations with people. Added to that, I'm someone who a few years ago was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, known also as emotionally unstable personality disorder, which kind of turned my whole life on its head. Since then, I've thought a lot about how much I wish I'd known that I'd had this fundamental issue in my life all along. That all the internal and external struggles I've known have had this mental health issue at their core. And maybe if someone with similar struggles had crossed my path and spoken candidly about what they go through, then maybe I or someone in my life might have been able to identify that in me earlier, and thus saved so many people, including myself, so much unnecessary pain. 1 in 4 people with BPD/EUPD make an attempt on their own life, which is what happened with me in 2022. And naturally, those from a working class background like myself will have so fewer means to receiving a diagnosis and the necessary help further down the line. In a way, I want to be that point of identification for others. Disorders such as mine and many other issues are more common than we suspect, and there are so many more people out there suffering than we'll ever know. If I can help just one person who otherwise would have suffered in silence, then I think I'll have done something that not only makes that someone else happier in their life, but also will have made me happy, because I just generally really like helping people.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, really.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit now about kind of the money behind the music. So a lot of people imagine that musicians, once they have a big fan base or they're on tour, that they've made it financially. What's the reality behind that?
The reality is that, particularly since the advent of streaming, the majority of musicians are earning so little that it would shock you. The way things are at the moment, you'd have to have had a very decent starting point in order to make the investments necessary to take the plunge into making an album or even going out on a short domestic tour. And that is why so many artists who come from wealthy backgrounds are dominating the music industry at the moment. They have the capital and the relative sense of comfort in their everyday lives in order to be able to set aside the time to write, rehearse, tour, record, promote, repeat. Meanwhile, almost everyone else is barely getting by during the cost of living crisis, leaving them too exhausted to create, rehearse, tour, etc., let alone financially afford it. So what we're seeing is, I think, the cultural eradication of the working class perspectives and experiences from the arts.
Yeah. So would you say that kind of the rise on streaming platforms has changed things dramatically for you and your peers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to put it simply, there is no way to make a living merely by making, releasing, and touring music. As a result, the consumer side of the exchange sees ticket prices rise, merch prices rise, and appreciators are consequently priced out of the culture. Artists can't merely be creators and performers any longer. We're also required to be like these fully rounded factotums, people with marketing and accounting heads on our shoulders, when really we should be spending our energies on the art and the performances. You know, the things that have value to the soul, that don't have like a price tag. You see artists on stage now, and there's always someone trailing behind them with a camera, because the show is now seen as a market opportunity as opposed to an experience unto itself. In a time when music has been so devalued because music streaming is so immediately accessible and the artist sees almost nothing in recompense for that stream, It's as if the art itself is now secondary to the idea of selling the image of the artist for clicks, likes, and follows. As well as making it impossible to pursue music as a way of life, it's just like so vacuous and soul destroying. As if the idea of competition in music via the arts wasn't already bad enough and depressing and always caused me personally so much strain. Now we've got fast capitalism, which is turning us all into these gaudy, exhausted husks, lying to ourselves as well as everyone else. We're all really struggling, unless, of course, you're in the top tier performers and they're all like raking it in. So, yeah.
Yeah. So would you say it's become harder to go from like a part-time creative to a full-time artist now compared to what it was maybe 10 years ago?
Like it's always been really difficult to make that transition, but I think it's way harder than it's ever been. And it's only going to get worse. Meanwhile, music appreciators are always going to want their favorite artists to continue creating, but the artists won't be able to. Like, who's going to fill that gap? So, those with the means are going to sort of swoop in, those of a certain socioeconomic status. The power dynamic will continue to shift, and only the privileged classes will have their perspectives and their experiences available to tell. By virtue of this, the working class artists will have lost a fundamental power of speaking their truth, and the working class music appreciators will have lost a fundamental power of having their truth heard through their favorite artists. Like, this is real, it's happening in real time, the struggle is real, and it's happening to all your favorite artists.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, because one of my favorite songs by you guys is Mary, and I think that
Right.
I really identified that with that song as a young person, because I came from a council estate, single parent family. So the
Yeah,
way you spoke about Mary, and I don't know if this is intended, but I pictured that Mary was your mum, and
she
you are,
is. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
amazing. So I used to listen to that song as if it was me and my mum. You know, the fact that you
Oh,
only had a bed and a TV in a room. So I really identified with that. So it will be such a shame if some of the working class people don't get to almost identify with music in the way that they did previously.
that's it. And like a lot of the working class artists that I was into, I didn't see them as working class artists. I just saw them as artists who I had shared experiences with, and I think you've got a lot of people on the far right and the right, a lot of the political commentators anyway, saying that anyone speaking about their experience are creating class war. And actually, like, the class war already exists because we are already divided from the haves. We who are struggling on a day-to-day basis, and this is like working families, working class families, people who are unemployed, even people who have mortgages, which is something me and my family never would have dreamed of having. They're struggling too, because the cost of living versus what we're earning, the cost of living is rising and what we're earning is not rising in relation to that. So everybody, apart from the top 1%, apart from the people who have trust funds, we're all struggling. So, when the far right political commentators talk about like a class war, the class war's being talked about in music and in art, and now Superman is allegedly woke, when he's always stood for the right as in like the correct, what people would term politically correct now. He stands for the underclass, he stands for the underprivileged, he stands for like the side of good, for fighting evil, for fighting corruption. There are images of him punching Nazis, and now that's considered woke. So yeah, when I wrote a song like Mary, I felt like I was just writing a song about me. But now, like 20 years later, looking back on it, it feels extremely working class. It feels almost like kitchen sink,
Yeah.
like a Ken Loach movie or something, when really it was just me talking about the experience that I'd had with my mum. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and it's so nice and refreshing to hear you speak like in such a raw way. And I think when we discussed before this podcast, you said that there's still kind of a stigma around artists admitting that they're struggling. Why do you think that stigma exists?
So success breeds success, and the lesser cousin of this is being seen as successful breeds possible success. So if artists outwardly said, guys, if you don't buy this next record, if you don't come and see us on this tour, if you don't buy our merch, we may have to quit doing this altogether because we can't afford to keep doing it. We have bills to pay too, just like everyone else, families to feed, etc. Like, this sounds and appears desperate, and that can be unappealing to appreciators, because appreciators want to know that they're into a sure thing, a force of nature, a mystery, a legend, an artist that's untouchable, that's got like this barrier between them and the audience. And we've always, I think, fundamentally worked on the philosophy that we want to break down those barriers between the fans or the audiences, the appreciators, and the band, which is why I've always made a point of like diving off something into the crowd, because I like the idea of smashing that barrier that concretely exists between us on stage up on a heightened platform and everyone else down below us. I'm like, I want to dive in there. I want to be in there because, you know, that's where I belong, kind of thing. So if we artists puncture that mystery, the spell of the music legend is broken, the bubble is popped, and we artists are mere mortals scrambling around looking to find our way through this life just like everyone else. That's why it's so much easier, I think, for the privileged classes to make it in this industry, because they've always floated above the common experience of the masses, being on stage, being above it all. It's a natural place for them to be. They went to private school, not a state comp. Of course, they deserve to be circled in lights on the stage. And because of their class privilege, they maintain that mystery, keep the spell going. They remain untouchable. And for the rest of us, our backs are breaking under the weight of maintaining the lie. And that's why I think also I felt like such an imposter in this industry. I've always felt like, oh, I don't quite deserve to be here. And, you know, I've always felt like around other bands, they've always operated so much easier in the industry than I always have. And then I find out that, like, you know, their parents are doctors and they went to private school. And I think that, you know, that they knew people before they were even in the industry, so it was easier for them to sort of be subsumed into the industry. Whereas me, I'm like an outsider, grew up on a council estate, working class, state comp, on a NHS, free school meals, so I always felt like I shouldn't be here. And I think that it's always, you know, it's been kind of counterproductive in a way, because I've always felt like, okay, well, if I'm not supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be out there, then I've always felt much closer to our fans than I think other bands feel. And I feel it's kind of like a natural part of the process to actually, you know, feel like this is a community rather than just us pursuing a career and trying to make loads of money and trying to see our name in lights and all that kind of stuff. But I think for so many artists out there, those who are of the privileged classes want to maintain that mystery. And if they are struggling, they're like, well, this is alien to me, and I don't want anyone to know that I'm going through this. This is kind of embarrassing. And for the have-nots, it's like, you know, if I don't maintain this mystery, then all the glamour is gone, all the glitz is gone. I'll never get it back. And then, like, how am I going to get my foothold again in this industry? You know, I've already it's considered lowering yourself to say, like, can you please buy our records? Can you please buy our merch? Can you please do the stuff so that we can keep making music? So I think fundamentally it's always been our philosophy to just like puncture that bubble from the off and just be like, hey guys, we're like everybody else. We're from this background. We're scrambling through this just like everybody else. And yeah, you know, things are really difficult, especially in the current you know, geopolitical crises we're witnessing at the moment on our televisions every single day, with the rich getting richer, with the super rich getting, I don't know, becoming these almost demigod like figures, and the rest of us are just like trying to scrape around in the muck. And I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And you kind of already touched on it, but do you think that people kind of shy away from, especially artists who have a platform, kind of shy away from talking about it because it's a bit taboo and they want to present a different idea of what they are?
Yeah, definitely. In the same way that no one wanted to talk about mental health struggles for fear of the stigma of appearing odd or weak or unpalatable, artists are now hesitant to discuss the financial struggles they're going through during the cost of living crisis, twinned with the advent of streaming services that are not giving back to the artists. And while the CEOs of these streaming services are banking billions and then investing their millions in overseas wars, you've got grassroots venues dying by the score and social programs that once offered bands like us a means of exploring our love of music. They're being axed. The dream of many artists has always been to be hitting the stadium tours. Like that was the goal, because performing to so many people is, let's be honest, rad. Like it's a beautiful thing. It's a really life affirming thing. And it's an awe-inspiring thing to experience when you're on that stage, to just see so many people in one place singing your songs. And obviously you have the financial incentive. But now it's not only because of that, it's also because it looks awesome on the socials.
Yeah.
Stuff like that says to people, I'm killing this thing. And appreciators naturally want to be a part of that too. Nobody wants their favorite band to be the group pleading with their fans to buy their stuff so they can just keep going. We're living in a world of facades and misdirection, and this is just another facade and misdirection. It's fake it till you make it on an industrial scale.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm self-admittedly a TikTok girly. I am always scrolling, and I will admit I'll see someone who's gone viral on TikTok and you'll see the numbers, and you often think that equates with money. And like you said, with these
Yeah.
streaming services, that's often not the case. So I was wondering if you could touch on the idea that, people should be grateful for any opportunity, even unpaid ones, and if you felt that pressure as well.
Yeah, well, TikTok's actually like a really interesting anomaly to the whole streaming thing, because I know a few people whose videos went viral and they've been able to buy houses off the back of it, like make
Yeah.
deposits on the houses. They've gone, this one video is just literally like I can afford to buy somewhere now, and it's magical. But like
Yeah.
in other regards, in so many regards, streaming services just like purely exploitative. But yeah, like I mean, gratitude is a big thing. Like from the beginning, it's always been the case. When you start out, you're expected to be grateful for being given the opportunity to perform in a venue. For the first several years of us touring, or not even touring, just like playing in London after we'd send all our demos out to the London promoters, it was all our money going into this thing, nothing coming out of it. And then, like, I think for one gig at the Bull and Gate in London, we got £2.50. And that suddenly felt like something worth celebrating and also like laughing at, because it was just like, it was ridiculous. They go, congratulations, you've earned £2.50 for this gig. And we were like, we've earned money, but also £2.50. This is crazy. But by the same token, we do feel really grateful, and we say this every single night on tour. We play this song called With You, and I've turned this song into like a devotion to our fans, because like without our fans we wouldn't be doing any of this stuff, and we are literally living the dream. I used to lie in my bed looking up at my Jimi Hendrix posters and my Blondie posters and my Oasis and Nirvana posters, and just dreaming of being in a recording studio or dreaming of being on stage. And so we are so grateful, and we're so grateful that we've been able to continue doing this thing over 2 decades since the release of our first record in 2005. But unless you're earning like super, super big bucks for labels, agents, promoters, and now streaming services, you're expected to be grateful for every little opportunity that comes your way. And what really sticks the knife in is that we're always told now to be like super grateful for being put on playlists of streaming services that are giving us nothing in return financially. So it's like, yes, okay, we're getting all this exposure, we're being played on these curated playlists, and we're expected to sort of say, oh my God, thank you so much, this is absolutely amazing. But exposure isn't enough, especially when you don't earn much from touring, and cost of living crises, people sometimes can't buy merch. They want to buy the merch, but they can't. So, we're like, we have bills to pay too. And gratitude isn't enough. You having gratitude for us giving you our content isn't enough. And we shouldn't be thanking you for putting us on curated playlists, because that's not enough. We need to be paid. We need to keep living. We need to keep our families afloat, not just to keep going every single day, to walk out the door and be able to buy milk and bread and coffee and feed our families, but also to continue doing this thing, because making music is really expensive. The investments that we make sometimes go completely unnoticed. So like every day, waking up in the morning and going, right, I've got like these 3 ideas, I need to finish these ideas. Like that's like an abstract responsibility that I have, that I carry with myself every single day. I go to my studio, which I pay rent on. I play the songs on my guitars, which I've paid for, using strings that I have to keep paying for. And the petrol that we need to use to get to and from gigs, the money that we need to pay our crew, the money that we need to pay up front, the rental of the venues, because all that stuff is paid for by the artist, the rental of the barricades, the rental of the security staff, all this stuff. So like there are all these costs that artists make that people don't think we make, but we actually do. And being positioned on a curated playlist isn't doing it for us.
Yeah.
You've shared in the past that music is more than just a career for you. It's essential for your well-being. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I truly believe that having music as a means to self-discovery and self-expression has saved my life. It's not simply an activity that I find validating, nor is it merely something that helps me pay my bills. Like, it's a fundamental aspect of my being. And I believe that that's the case, not just for me, but for so many people out there. And I think we as a society, and especially we in the music industry, need to do more to facilitate the provision of resources to for people to like first discover what music means to them, and then to use it as a way to become themselves. And it was always the argument that, like, you get to do this thing for a living, therefore, you should be grateful. And gratitude is something that we've discussed already. And yes, it is like something we are grateful for. And I think that if we were ever in the position financially to stop making music, that would be a huge disadvantage for me. Because as someone who's always found it really difficult to express myself in conversation, who's always found it really difficult to identify myself within myself. I remember when I was first diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, they asked me to describe what it is to feel like being myself. And I said, I always feel like I am this empty vessel that just has air going in and out of it every single day. This empty, see-through thing that has no center to it. That, I'd have these moments where I'd just be a passenger inside my own head, and I'd just kind of be drifting through the day. And music has been a way for me to be able to find myself, a way to be able to identify myself, to locate myself within this existence. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here. And I was lucky enough to have the provisions and the resources and the environment to explore my love of music, to explore how I was going to express myself through music. And I lament, and I am always so sad, especially over the last 15 years since the Conservative, I hate to get political, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to, the Conservative government stripping away all the resources for social programs, for schools, for the NHS, these vital aspects and services that allow people to simply just exist and function have been taken away from them, as if we don't have any rights to them. And I feel like music for me was one of those lifelines. It was one of those ways for me to be able to wake up and realize I have a purpose, I have a being, I have a sense of self. And if I didn't have that, I know for a fact that I wouldn't be here. And I feel so bad for all the kids, for all the artists who won't get that, especially over the last 15 years, and who won't have it over the next 15 to 30 years because of the effects of Tory austerity, because of the current Labour government that seem to concede to this Daily Mail argument that, like, you need to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and just get on with life and grit your teeth and get through it. And while we're working for all these people who are getting super, 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 super rich. Yeah, I've lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry. But I just feel like, yeah, music is something. Music found me. I was lost, and then I heard Smokey Robinson's Tracks on My Tears, and I was like, what is this thing that makes me feel this way? How can something make me feel this way? And also, what is this thing that makes Smokey Robinson feel this way, that he has to write a song about it, and he has to write so beautifully about it in order to convince everyone else that this is what he feels, this is how he feels, and he wants to reach out to people and see if they experience it too. Like, what is this thing? And then I got really into it. I got really into music theory. I got really into history. I got really into theatre. I got really into movies. I got really into literature. And I realized that all this stuff has always existed. Like, since the dawn of civilization, we've been making music, dancing around the campfire, praying for rain, believing that if we sang to the gods via that communication, they would hear us. And that's how we speak to each other as well. We realized that that's how we were going to speak to each other as communities, across cultures, the way that we can get into music from other parts of the globe that would completely give us this in to a new way of life, to a new way of living, to a new way of being. And then we'd find ourselves there. Music is like that. That's what music is to me. And I just want other people to be able to find that for themselves, even if it's not music, if it's woodwork, or if it's working with electronics, if it's working with trees. Like, I recently, one of my best, dearest friends, he's always been so troubled, he's always been in a struggle, he's always had the most beautiful heart and the most beautiful brain. And then all of a sudden he decided where he was meant to be. He was meant to work in forestry. He was meant to work with trees. It was meant to work with the landscape. And I've never seen him so happy. It makes me want to cry. And I just wish he'd found that earlier. And I wish he had the means to be able to find that earlier. And I just think that that's what we need to be facilitating in this society, not making people these nodes of profit, of revenue, of price tags, or anything like that. Like, making allowance for the idea that culture has a value as well, whether it's in the environmental sector or whether it's in the trades and labor and that kind of thing. So my love for music is a philosophical one. Like, it's a nature of being.
Part of you.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the way you speak so passionately about it. How do you, I don't know the word this, do financial struggles or instability impact your mental health, especially when music is your outlet? It's part of your being. How do you get that balance?
So like, when financial struggles arise, and they arise with everybody, and they've arisen with me, like, when I've experienced financial struggles, they've caused holistic strains. Like, the financial issue is one that permeates every nature of our day. And so anything we do, we are constantly like, I can't do this, I don't have the money. Or you go somewhere and you actually start enjoying yourself, and then you realize what you're going through, and it's going to continue, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. Like, financial strain is a holistic thing. And I think one of the aspects of that when working in the music industry is the impact financial struggles have on your ability to continue making music. When the struggles of life are getting you down, music can be an outlet. But if the struggles are such that you don't have the opportunities to express yourself, it then becomes this vicious circle where you're struggling, but you can't process any of that through your music. And then there's no way out. And you either push through and thus utterly exhaust yourself, which may not produce like the best of results. I've been there. Or you give up entirely, and I've been there too. And it's just a horrible place to be in. And like, I'm a big advocate for universal basic income. You know, I don't think it's going to be a panacea, a silver bullet, a thing that's going to eradicate poverty or financial struggles. But I think it gives people something. Like, there was this, I invoked the whole, the phraseology, the idea of like the conservative mindset of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But I remember hearing this thing of like, how can you pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have any boots? Like, we have to produce and provide these safety nets for people so that they can then create effectively. And I think like we are all at our best when we are creating, not producing. Like, there's this economic argument that is like, we want to make people producers, and you know, producers of assets, producers of material goods, producers of economic viability. And actually, I think we need to make people creators, or not make people creators, but if people want to be creators, provide that for them. Because I think like a society and a community that creates is a society that gives. And I think that's what makes us so great about being human, is our capacity to be able to give up, to sacrifice, to hand over, to let go. And that being a reward unto itself. Like, I used to find it really stressful, and this is the power of capitalism. I used to find it really stressful, the idea of handing a song over, it being recorded, handing it over to the record label, because then it's not my song anymore. It's the record label's song. It's their product. They would call it a product. And I'd be like, but it's my song. It's part of me. It's part of my experience. It's something I created. And I realized eventually that the problem I had was not handing over the song and giving it to people for them to take as their own, associate their own experiences with that, and sing along as if it were their own. The problem was giving it to the record label to then monetize, to then give to the people, acting as a middleman. And that caused an awful lot of anxiety within me, because the idea of being in a band, making money, was so alien to me. And it shouldn't be alien. Like, the idea that our music is something that creates more than just money, but like cultural value, should be intrinsically tied in with the fact that it makes money. So, you know, there are so many social programs, and some of like the like France has a program where if you choose to be an artist and you choose to go out on tour, then by virtue of that fact, you get grants from the government, because you are contributing to the cultural economy, which is just as valuable as the GDP and all that stuff. So I think that the anxiety for me was always the reconciliation between like the artifact of the song as something that inhabits a part of me, and that the appreciator is going to associate with themselves and subsume into their own experience. reconciling that whole process with the capitalist process of a price tag being associated with my song, I always found it really weird looking at a single and seeing £2.99 on it. I was like, this is crazy to me. Like there is a concrete value to my work here. And I think it really is just about finding ways of reconciling the cultural and economic value of art, which I think Western cultures are really resistant to, because it's like, we want movies, we want books, we want music, and we want them now. But, we're struggling. So why should we have to pay an awful lot for that? Like, why should we have to pay per song, per album, and all that kind of stuff? And the streaming services have found a way to facilitate that. But the thing is, the streaming services have now taken the place of the record labels. They've seen that they can make yacht money off this. And so they're going, well, we can, if we become the new version of the record label, we could all own yachts, without realizing that nobody needs to own a yacht. Nobody needs 20 houses. Nobody needs any of that stuff, especially when, you look at the money that someone like Elon Musk has, and he could eradicate world hunger with a snap of his finger, but he chooses not to, because he places too much value on the idea of himself being so unfathomably rich and so powerful. And I think that that's alien to me, because I think as artists, it's natural for us to create something and have it transmitted and given away in its abstract form. Because when we perform something, it's giving over, it's, relinquishing control of it. And that's why I think it's really difficult for we artists to go, we want to put a price tag on the music. We want to say we deserve more, because we've been taught so often that we're the artist, shut up, be grateful. Here's a little bit of money. You're welcome. So yeah, I think when we're in financial struggles and we're really struggling, it's difficult for us to go, yeah, we're really struggling. The financial issue is a real issue for us. We're not culling it. We're getting on the playlists, we're getting on the festival lineups, but it's not enough. Everybody else is getting rich. We're putting the effort in. They're putting effort in too, but we are providing the content that's making people doing the dancing and doing the singing and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's I was talking about this to someone the other day, where there is just so much going on. There is just so much exhaustion that it's almost difficult to locate the single problem that's going on here in society generally, not just within the music industry. I think that globally, politically, socially, culturally, there's like this panoply of issues. They're flooding the zone with concerns, with struggles, with strife, with division, that it's difficult to put your finger on one thing that's going to solve it. And the only thing that's really going to solve it is that we all need to muck in. We all need to contribute. We all need to look out for each other, and we all need to lift each other up, and we need to stop throwing each other to the floor and stepping on each other's necks to try and get the headline slot, to try and get the Radio 1 playlist, to try and get on the curated playlist, all this sort of stuff. And this is about artists communicating with their fans and their audiences and people who have no idea who they are. It's about appreciators communicating with the artists and communicating with each other, and everybody learning lessons along the way. And I think that what political division has created is firmer roots on one side or the other. And it's really difficult for us to think fluidly, and to give up ground, because if we give up ground, we lose. And I think actually, no, if we give up ground, in a way, we win, because pride is a heavy burden to carry around with yourself all the time. It's it's a suffocating bubble in which to live. And I realized a couple of years ago that to say sorry, that to say you're wrong, that to say you have so much to learn, that to stop talking and actually to listen, they are liberating things to experience. And I think we all need to do that. We all need to stop, take a breath, and just listen to each other for a second.
Yeah. Powerful words.
Sorry. Like I told you at the beginning, I talk. I'm so sorry.
I know, it's amazing. It really is. That's why we wanted you on. Have you ever felt like stepping back from music because of the financial pressures? I think you touched on it a bit earlier, but can you share a bit more information on that?
So honestly, no. Regardless of my circumstance, there will always be a place for music in my life. Life being what it is, there will invariably be times when creating, performing will be more difficult. And then sometimes it's much easier. But music isn't something that I can step away from. In something that I have to do in order to continue being me. But there have unfortunately been times where music has had to feature a little lower on the priority list, and those have been the most difficult times of all. Because there's no doubt that if music and making music and expressing myself through music were playing a bigger role in my life at that time, the situation would have been infinitely more bearable for me. And that's why things like, financial struggle, they in some cases they can create really brilliant pieces of work. But I think fundamentally, and 99.999% of the time, it's just gonna force the artist into giving up and moving on to something else. I know that over the course of the pandemic, because the provisions weren't necessarily provided for people working in the creative arts industry, people who I knew, even working on like the crew side of things, engineers, front of house engineers, riggers, techies, stage managers, they gave up. They're like, there's nothing here for me. And so what happened after the pandemic was there was this clamor for crew, and some artists have to cancel tours because they didn't have the crew to take on tour to help them do the things that they needed to do to facilitate a rock and roll show, or any kind of show. But I'm primarily thinking rock and roll. So yeah, I did take a couple of years away from music when I studied the degree. But I didn't. I was doing 2,000 word essays, handwritten, word processor, whatever, reading tons and tons of books. But then, I'd always have to find time for my guitar. I'd always have to go, right, I need to pick up my guitar. And some student in the dorm next door was banging on. I've got a chemistry lecture at 7 a.m, you bastard. But I had to do it because the act of playing the guitar, the act of playing the piano or singing it's just a way that my brain functions. It's a way that I am able to apprehend, comprehend, process, and cope with the world that's going on around me. So even when I was like, reading like reams of Chaucer and Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff, I was just like, I need to play some Nirvana, and I need to chuck a few chords of Smells of Teen Spirit. So yeah, at whatever level, in whatever capacity, music is always going to be a really important part of my life. You better hope that I'm still playing on stage, because otherwise I'm going to be the guy at the party with the acoustic guitar. I won't play Wonderwall, but that's how it will manifest, unfortunately.
Amazing, thank you.
I love it. Moving on to the final bit, 'cause I think we've picked your brains enough today. But I love asking all of our guests, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about money, what would it be?
Right.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, it's so I would there are so many things that I would go back and tell myself. Like, just off the subject, I would go back and I'd say, just chill out for a second. Calm down. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Please, just stop being so uptight. You're driving everybody crazy, not least yourself. But if I could go back, I would say invest more of that money back into the art. Like, buy your guitars, buy recording equipment, book in more rehearsals, spend more time in artistic spaces. I think growing up working class, I wanted all those things that I couldn't have when I was younger. But then I found that when I had the opportunity to buy them and have them, it never really made that difference to me. Like, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected to feel. And I realized that what I actually yearned for was a paradigm in which I could keep making music, keep doing that thing that I loved so much and gave me so much validation, that made me discover myself and continue to rediscover myself, because we are an unending book, all of us. There is no ending line. There's no Volta to our lives, our sense of selves. We are always growing. We're always regressing. We're always taking steps back. We're always sometimes just treading water, and that itself is sometimes unexplainable and ineffable. So I would go back and I'd say, don't listen to what society is telling you. Don't listen to them that you have to keep achieving, you have to keep earning, you have to keep acquiring material goods, all the things that we working class people are convinced is the dreamy stuff of life. Music is the dreamy stuff of life. You're right. You're not wrong. I have this recording and rehearsal studio now, and it's the space in which I spend most of my time of the day. I have all my books there, I have all my DVDs there, I have all the mementos from touring and recording there, all my CD collection, my vinyl collection, and I just wished I'd invested in a space like that sooner. And I would encourage anybody to invest in that kind of space. And to not just make that space accessible to you, to make it accessible to your friends. Invite your friends over, invite people you've just met over, get them into music, lend them a guitar, lend them a piano, lend them a microphone. Have a half a day where you get them to just record anything, even if it's terrible. Let them go through the process of recording. So yeah, I would establish that kind of paradigm a little bit earlier, and encourage myself to reinvest in music. None of the glitz and glamour that I thought was so special that I got really, really sick of very, very quickly. It's amazing. I read this. I read the Guardian article with self-esteem the other day, and she was saying that she, after 15 years of doing various projects, a second album, Prioritized Pleasure, did everything she always wanted in her career. And she got the opportunity she'd always wanted. She was able to buy the things that she'd always wanted. And she realized actually she was just still dissatisfied, that none of that stuff made her what she'd always wanted to be. She already was what she always wanted to be. And she just had to keep rediscovering that. And that's so true. And I look back and I think, well, that's kind of what Arthur Miller was saying in Death of a Salesman. That's what all those mid 20th century movies and plays and pieces of literature and songs were saying. They've said it to us all along. The American capitalist dream is a lie, that actually we have all we've ever wanted right there, if we just care to realize it. So, now that we're going through this situation where music is devalued more than it ever has been before, where people are struggling more than they ever have before, we are like, all we want to do is just to keep going. That's all we're asking for. So I think a fundamental paradigm shift in how we envision the creative arts industry, how we envision people and their contributions to society, how we envision money, who owns it, how they should own it, why they should own it. You know, the power or lack thereof of free will given our financial and socioeconomic status, and how that affects what we want to achieve, not as artists looking to top the bill, just as artists trying to discover ourselves within ourselves and find other people who share that same experience, or even contradict that and challenge us even further. So yeah, I wish I could just invest in the process more, the process of being an artist more.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting what you said, because I studied psychology at uni, and
Right.
I remember this study that basically analysed whether money leads to happiness. And
Mm.
to a certain extent, it went like that because obviously when you're
Yeah.
allowed to pay bills and you don't have the money worries, but then it just plateaued after a certain amount, and people think that it
Yeah.
just keeps going up where it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I find it so interesting.
It is. I think there was so I think what happens is when you reach a certain socioeconomic position, when you have a certain amount of assets, and I think there is, like, psychologically, as you say, like there is like a roundabout number where a point is reached and they're like, oh, well, I can do anything now. Like I can, like, I've always wanted a Porsche 911. I could get 20. And there's almost something like unfulfilling about it. I remember Kurt Cobain, like, he's my ultimate hero. I grew up listening to Nirvana. Nirvana shaped me. Kurt Cobain's philosophy and music and life and culture shaped me. But I remember him saying that when he was a struggling artist, he had this thrill in him that he didn't have later on when he could buy anything he wanted, which was the thrill of going into a pawn shop, or not PORN, PAWN, by the way. In America, they're called pawn shops. For us, a charity shop. I still go into charity shops. I'm like, what am I going to find? Am I going to find that Balzac that I've always wanted? you know. I'm obsessed with Honoré de Balzac's literature at the moment, by the way. That's what I just cannot get him off my brain. And he said, he reached a point where he could buy a Lexus, he could buy a Porsche or a Ferrari, he could buy a house, he could buy, like, the most expensive guitar in the world if he wanted. And it was almost like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the purpose now? What's driving me forwards? And I think the problem here is that the purpose we've been given is to acquire. The purpose we've been given is to elevate our socioeconomic status above everyone else. And once that's done, it's like, well, what is my purpose then? It's got to be surely more than the acquisition of money and the maintenance of that money in my bank account, or the acquisition of even more money. And I think for some people of a certain psychology, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists like Elon Musk, the goal becomes to be the ultimate, the guy with the most money, with the most, who's the CEO of the most companies, who has the most amount of children, all these really perverse acquisitions that he needs to get to fill that vacuous soul, or the vacuous hole, the abyss within him where a soul should be. And I think that for most of us anyway, when we reach that certain threshold of wealth, we're like, okay, so now what do I do? And we all have a crisis. We're like, well, what's my purpose? What's my drive? What do I do now? Because I can, like, if I wanted to go and take a PhD, I can do that. I can invest the hundreds of thousands of pounds that's necessary to go and do that. If I wanted to buy a Rupert Neve Designs 64 channel 5088, I could do that. That's nothing to me. And the drive is no longer there. And I think, like, the drive has to be to give, doesn't it? The drive has to be to create, to manifest something that wasn't there before, we came along, before we thought about it. Whether it's like a result of some generic movement that we've taken and adopted and given it new life and new voice in the now. It doesn't have to be, abstract expressionist or anything. It can be like a pop song, but it's something we've created by a conglomeration of all these various factors, of like samples over here, of a Kylie Minogue line over here, a Slipknot drum beat over here. We're at least creating. There is something perpetual and infinite about the idea of giving, and I think that should be the incentive. And then, regardless of the amount of money that we earn, we are still fulfilling ourselves. And there's no crisis.
I love that. I think that's a beautiful note to end it on, to be fair. I think that's really helpful. And I just want to thank you again, because I interview a lot of people, and sometimes you meet someone with so much passion that you feel it like through the screen, and that's definitely been today. So thank you so much. I've learned a lot.
Bless you. I sometimes have to apologize for my passion. Like,
never.
I'll be talking away, and people's eyes will be glazing over. I'll be like, I'm sorry. What were you saying? I sometimes, like, I'm talking away to my girlfriend, and I think she's like really receptive, and it's like, and then I realize, like, I stopped talking. I've been talking for 15 whole minutes. She just looks at me and just bursts out laughing, and I'm like, done it again, haven't I? I'm sorry. She's like, no, I love it. It's just so cute to watch you talk.
No, it is amazing.
That's me.
I absolutely love it. So where's people listening, again, where can they find you if they haven't heard of the Subways before?
So you can find the Subways at thesubways.net. That's our website. We'll have our shop there. We have all our gig listings there. We have all our videos, our discography there. You can find us on Instagram at the Subways. You can find me on Instagram at Billy Lunn. Yes, that's right. That's my name. You can find Charlotte. I think Charlotte is Charlotte Subway. And Camille, our drummer, is, I think, Camille Phillips. Yeah, at Camille Phillips. And I'm trying to think where else. Yeah, you can find us on all the streaming services, or most of the streaming services. We're on Facebook at the Subways. And hopefully playing a festival near you.
Amazing. Well, I'll link everything below, so it's easy for people to find. But thank you again. Gem, did you have any closing words you wanted to add?
No, just a thank you, and I will see you at the Grove in Newcastle shortly.
Yeah, we love playing in Newcastle so much. We played, I can't remember what venue it was. I think it might have been Academy 2 or something. It was upstairs. But I had people coming up to us afterwards going, we thought the floor was going to break. It was just, because apparently it was like bouncing like this. We've always had such a great time in Newcastle.
I was at that gig. So the last one I saw you at was at I always call it the Calling Academy. It's not. It hasn't been that for years, but that's what it was back in the day. Yeah. And I was on the balcony and people were jumping, and I was like, I am going to go over here any moment.
Oh my God.
Did I jump off it?
You jump off every stage I've ever seen you on. So.
Genuinely, I don't feel like it's a proper show unless I've jumped off the stage or off the speaker cabinets or off a balcony or something. Like, it has to happen. Like, it doesn't feel like a gig to me. I have to feel the sweat of other people. Yeah, and it is just so fun. Have you ever crowd surfed?
I haven't, no.
Right, we'll get you crowd surfing at the next gig. It is the most fun you'll have in your entire life. It is like, if you see like photos or videos of me crowd surfing, I've just always got this huge smile on my face because I'm like, this is so fun. Yeah,
I'll be hiding at the Grove. I'm like, there's Gemma, get her.
I'm getting you on stage to do a stage dive.
I love it. Well, thank you very much again to everyone listening. We will see you next time. But that is it from us. So, bye.